A lot to dive into today. Doug Peterson addressing the media, updated the status of two key Eagles. We'll start with that. John McMullen here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. And, John, what can you tell us about the injuries to Peters and Jordan Hicks?
Tough ones there. I mean, obviously you're excited about being 6-1 and beating the Redskins, sweeping the season series, but those are two season-ending injuries. Jason Peters torn ACL, torn MCL, and remember, it's a 35-year-old player, so now you have to talk about him being 36, trying to come off that kind of knee injury. You start talking about his football mortality, and then you have Jordan Hicks, torn Achilles, done for the year as well. Devastating injuries for the Philadelphia Eagles, and it's been a next man up mentality, but this is a different animal because this is two leaders who are not only leaders and team captains, but very good players. It's just going to be really difficult to replace both of them.
One thing on Jason Peters, I guess, you had wrote earlier that they were hopeful, and obviously that didn't come to play. So with him, is there any, I know he just kind of addressed some internal options and what they might do, but he did say they might look outside. Are there better options outside, or do you think they will just stick with what they got?
I think they're going to stick with what they have. I think they're very happy with the way Big V has played in his opportunities because, remember, he got some time when Lane Johnson went out with a concussion against Arizona. Then he had to play against Carolina. Then he has to play again on the other side as Jason Peters goes down. And he held up pretty well. I think he had some issues early against the Panthers when they knew he was going to be out there and they could kind of game plan him. But even from that perspective, he kind of settled down and did okay. So I think they're hopeful. They have a lot of confidence in him as a young player. I think if you look at guys on the open market, Brandon Albert, Will Beatty, players like that, they might have bigger names, obviously, but they're on the street for a reason, and it's not because they're really, really good football players any longer. So the one that would certainly at least be an interesting way to go would be Dwayne Brown in Houston. He held out. He's still a very good player. He just came in. There's talk the Texans might trade him because of all the ill will that's gone on down there. But there's two hurdles to that. Not only do you have to trade for him, remember, the Eagles don't have a ton of draft choices to begin with. So they don't have a ton of ammunition to go get a player like that. But you never say never with Howie Roseman. I still think, though, it's going to be Vaitai, and the bigger question is, where does he play, right tackle or left tackle? Because it's no guarantee they're going to automatically flip Lane Johnson to left tackle.
Right. Now, they had discussed back in the preseason that if there was a possibility, a long-term injury, they might consider it. But it sounds like he's going back to what he said last year, where we don't want to move two guys if we only have to move one. Now, Vaitai played left tackle when he was in college, so he might be more comfortable at left tackle. I know Lane Johnson did as well, but he has spent his entire NFL career, for the most part, playing right tackle. So is Vaitai at left and Johnson at right, number one, the most feasible, and number two, maybe the best case for them?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to find out, I think, tomorrow. I think it's going to happen really, really quickly. Doug said today he's going to talk it over with Jeff Stoutland, the offensive line coach, and obviously Frank Wright, the coordinator. And they'll decide how to move forward. I mean, there's arguments for both sort of end games in the fact that, hey, Lane's your best option. He would be your best left tackle. So from that standpoint, it makes sense. He was originally drafted to be a left tackle once Jason Peters finished up, but he's been so effective. He keeps playing and playing and playing. so it never materialized. And then you have the other aspect where, instead of shaking up one position, you're shaking up two positions, and you're making two guys maybe more uncomfortable, as you mentioned. If Vitae feels a little bit better at left tackle, because that's more natural for him. And Lane has proven to be perhaps the best right tackle in football. So I see both sides of the argument. Ultimately, if you're asking me, I would move Lane Johnson to left tackle. That's what you drafted him for originally. He's paid like a left tackle. You might as well move him there. And I do think ultimately Vitae would have some serious struggles, because even though this league's kind of morphed and there are plenty of good pass rushers on the other side, as evidenced by some of the players Lane Johnson has had to deal with so far, and you look at Von Miller on the upcoming schedule as a player who is generally going to go against the right tackle, it's still the left tackle is a more difficult position to play, especially with a right-handed quarterback.
John McMullen with us. John, that's the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side, they lost a key player as well. How about Jordan Hicks? What's the plan there, and are there any outside names there they might pursue?
Yeah, remember when Jordan was struggling with the ankle injury, the Eagles brought in a number of veteran linebackers just to kick the tires on him, just in case. So they were thinking about it before, and I could see them making a move as far as bringing in a veteran there, more so than left tackle. I think they have confidence in Michael Kendricks when he's able to play in the nickel defense. He's been much improved. He's played very, very well. But you see it again. It crops up in practice, the hamstring. It's been an issue with him for a number of times. I'm not sure you can count on him. And there, the drop-off is pretty severe. And I think you saw it at times with Najee Good. Had to play a lot yesterday, got lost in coverage a number of times. And then in the base defense, which the Eagles didn't play much against Washington. They were mainly in the nickel, but then it's Joe Walker. I think Joe can survive playing middle linebacker for 15 to 20 snaps a game. So I don't think that's as big as an issue. The question is the nickel package, and you need Michael Kendricks on the field. I think if he's on the field, you're fine, because Nigel Bradham has been tremendous this season. But I don't know if you can count on Michael Kendricks.
Do they lose in Jordan Hicks, that quarterback on the defense, from being able to interpret the calls and kind of let the other guys free wheel too? I mean, what do they lose from Jordan Hicks in addition to just his playmaking ability?
Yeah, I mean, he's a three-down linebacker, and he's the guy who communicates the calls to the front seven, and that changes when he's not in the game. And that's, Nigel deserves a ton of credit for that, because remember, Jordan has been out a number of times, nicked up, before this injury. He first had the ankle injury, then while he was favoring the ankle, he hurt his calf. And at times, Nigel has had to move over. What happens is he takes over Jordan's position in the nickel, and then whether it's Michael Kendricks or Najee Good, they come in and take over Nigel's position. So it's moving parts, and Nigel's the one who is communicating and getting the calls from Jim Schwartz, and he's done very well at it. This is the first time he's ever done it, and he's done it under difficult circumstances. So I think the Eagles are optimistic because of how well he's handled it. He'll be fine, but it's not the optimal situation when you lose a player who's as talented, who's as good, and who's as important to the team as Jordan Hicks.
Was that Derek Barnett's best game as an Eagle last night?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, people, not because of the sacks. I mean, people get caught up in sack numbers when they talk about defensive ends, and sometimes that is not a fair sort of way to judge guys. But you could see, talking to him in the locker room after the game, there was a little weight off his shoulders, finally getting to the corner of the quarterback a couple of times. I think the evidence by the amount of time he's out there and the fact that he's playing more than Vinny Curry, he's progressing nicely. And ultimately, I think by the end of the season, he'll probably be the guy who's starting at the right defensive end, or at least playing the most. And I think it hasn't been spectacular. It hasn't been splashy. But I think the Eagles are pretty happy with how Derek is developing.
And Mike and I talked about this earlier in the show, John. What does it say about the depth on the defensive line when Tim Jernigan leaves after only 17 snaps and you hardly notice?
Yeah, I mean, that's really, if you think about Fletcher being out 2 games as well. And Tim's been dealing with a bulky ankle, and that's why he hasn't played that much really in the last 2 games, also in Carolina. And guys like Bo Allen and Destiny Baye was back yesterday against the Redskins, and they filled in nicely. But you would certainly want Fletcher and Tim Jernigan out there together. That's when the Eagles are obviously at their best. So you'd like to get them healthy and playing his normal reps. But, yeah, they've been very impressive on the front, and part of that is the depth that they have.
John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. John, obviously, with Hicks being done for the year and Peters being done for the year, they have 2 spots that they can fill on the roster, and he hinted today that, they might go outside the organization or, they'll start in-house and all those things. But, obviously, who are some candidates inside the organization that he talked about that might be up there?
Well, I think when you look at tackle, the most obvious way they could go is Dylan Gordon, promoting him from the practice squad. I thought he was going to make the 53-man roster originally, had a really bad final preseason game, but that would be the most logical guy to sort of bring up on tackle. But also Isaac Seumalo, kind of forgotten. He's been working his way back, and yesterday he was active. So he's making incremental improvement. Now he becomes far more important as the main backup at tackle. One of the things the Eagles liked so much about Isaac was his versatility, and it was interesting that he played every position on the offensive line except left guard in college, and that's ultimately where he ended up starting here and not playing very well, and obviously losing that job. Now he's more important again, and he's going to be the backup swing tackle on game days. If you remember in Baltimore last year at the end of the season, he was forced to play right tackle and played it pretty well. So he's another guy. Perhaps he's just more comfortable playing outside or playing positions other than left guard, the one position he's in playing college. So that's the hope. And he'll be sort of in that jumbo formation that the Eagles use with an extra offensive lineman. That's been Vaitai. Now it's going to be Isaac Seumalo. So he's going to be active. He's going to be playing at times, and he's going to be far more important to this team. And hopefully taking a step back will give him some confidence, and we'll see if he can handle the job.
John, I want to go back to Peters real fast because he did sign an extension in the offseason that keeps him here through 2019. What's this injury mean for that?
Well, it's difficult because, as I said, he's going to be 36 years old. And typically, I mean, if you look at the history of left tackles, there's not many 35-year-olds who've ever played the position at the type of level Jason was playing it at. So he was already sort of going against the norm, and now you're going to be talking about a 36-year-old trying to come back from a torn ACL, a torn MCL, and Jason's a big guy, man. He's 6'4", 330, but you know what? He's also somebody who's come back from Achilles injury, and that's one where even way back then I said, maybe he's not going to be able to come back because he is so big. And that's an injury that can sort of reoccur, and he hasn't had an issue. So he is sort of beaten the odds so many times. You would hate to bet against him. And he's such a good football player. He's going to end up at Canton. He's going to have a gold jacket. I can't even explain to you the reverence everybody in that locker room talks about Jason Peters with. He's got so much respect in this league, but the reality is the one opponent that gets everybody is Father Time, and this is going to be a tough injury at 36 to come back from.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about, John, the reverence that the players have for Jason Peters. And I know the press box isn't closed, but were you able to hear last night the entire crowd yelling, Jason Peters, trying to give him a shout-out as he was getting carted off? I saw the Redskins lineman come over and give him a little fist bump, too. And, I mean, even as he's getting carted off, he's telling his replacement some of the tendencies. Look for this, do this. I mean, the guy clearly held in high regard.
Yeah, I thought that was the best when Carson kind of told that story, and we went to talk to Big V about it, and that was the case. I mean, the guy's injured. The guy's got a shredded knee. He's on a cart, and he's trying to give his replacement tips on how to beat the Redskins. And if that doesn't explain why he's so well respected, I don't know what will. I mean, he's sort of an extra coach for this team. When you talk about leaders, Jason doesn't talk a lot. He's not a Malcolm Jenkins type who's always, very comfortable with the media, or even a Zach Ertz, or even Carson for that matter. But like I said, in the locker room, there's nobody who has more respect than Jason Peters on this team. And even you talk about around the league, you mentioned the Redskins coming up. It goes far beyond that. He's one of those guys that is just, when people talk about the Hall of Fame and they say potential Hall of Famer, it's not even a potential with him. Everyone just says Hall of Famer. And that's very difficult to replace.
Right. Hey, John, real quick on the receiving spot. Obviously, Torrey Smith, I think, had one target last night, not doing much. I mean, he still has his role, but Hollins, I think he has, 5 catches? 5 of them are for a first down or a touchdown. I mean, everything he's done has been a positive. Are we starting to see Doug maybe start to switch over a little bit here, or is that just, a couple of plays he's adding? Saw Marcus Johnson last night again take a shot down the field to him. Are we starting to see these rookies or these younger guys starting to get halfway through the year? They're starting to understand more. I mean, are you going to start to see more of Hollins over Smith, or is that just a certain package?
Well, right now it's just a certain package, and Doug got asked that question at the end of his press conference today. I mean, you have to entertain that. Torrey Smith has done nothing, and really his one target was Carson's interception, where he failed to track the ball. Now, it ended up being a glorified punt, and it didn't hurt the Eagles at all. But just watching him try to track that football was kind of not good. Let's put it that way. And Matt Collins keeps making plays in very limited opportunities. And if he's able to stretch the field and be somewhat effective catching the football, well, that's better than what Torrey Smith is giving you. And right now, he's averaging over 20 yards a catch. He ignited the offense with the 64-yard touchdown. As this season wears on, I would not be surprised at all if Matt Collins starts to take over more of Torrey Smith's role.
Yeah, Johnny, and of course, the two key guys, I mean, you can make a case that Nelson Aguilar is becoming his favorite target at wide receiver, even over Alshon, and obviously Ertz is his main target. But the role that Nelson has played in this offense is nobody could predict it. As much as you guys reported in training camp and minicamp that this guy looked different, no one could have surmised that he would be on the level he's at right now.
No, I agree with that. I thought he could be a useful player. Right now, I mean, I'll say it. He's the Eagles' best receiver right now as we speak today.
Give Chip all the credit.
Yeah, well, hey, Chip deserves a little credit. He also got Jordan Hicks as well. So he didn't make every bad decision, but obviously, people are too quick to dismiss players, and some guys don't have difficulty making the leap from the college level to the professional level. And Nelson's obviously one of those guys. He was very, very bad his first few seasons. There's no
ifs, ands, or buts.
Really, yeah, I mean, you can't dismiss that, but the light has come off. He's playing with confidence, and right now he's tremendously effective. And Carson Wentz trusts him, and as I said, he doesn't have the best hands in the world. He bobbled another one. I think that's not going to change, but he's always open, and he's generally making a big play or two in every game, and that's more than you can say about Alshon Jeffrey or Torrey Smith.
By the way, Chip drafted Lane Johnson, Zach Ertz, Benny Logan, who's turned out to be a nice player, Jordan Poyer, who some think might be one of the top safeties in the league right now.
He has been this year.
The way he's playing. So there's a couple of guys in that first draft class. Jordan Matthews.
They're all better now, though.
Yes, exactly. Jordan Matthews, really the only guy in that. Bo Allen, he actually drafted as well. Jalen Watkins, is he back active, Watkins?
Yeah, he played yesterday.
Marcus Smith out there in Seattle doing a little bit. Nelson Aguilar, Jordan Hicks. Eric Rowe, by the way, some news on Eric Rowe. He is not going to play enough snaps for the Eagles to get that fourth-round pick. So
he's about 19%. It would actually be they're going to get a fourth-round pick.
Yep.
If he played 50%, they would get a third-round pick. That's not going to happen. He's been out with a groin injury, and also if you want to talk about Chip deserves credit. If he didn't destroy this team with some bad decisions, they wouldn't have Carson Wentz. And Carson Wentz is the engine that.
Well, that's a way to look at it there. His ineptitude landed you Carson Wentz. Thank you, Chippa. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. John's got tons of Eagles stuff right now on our website, 973ESPN.com. You can always follow him at JF McMullen to get it. And, of course, John will be there on Sunday for Eagles and 49ers, the 0-7 Niners against the 6-1 Eagles. And, of course, the countdown to kickoff starts live from McFadden's at the ballpark at 10 a.m. I assume those crowds have got to be getting bigger and bigger at these tailgate parties as the Eagles continue to win. The Sports Bash Live with Johnny Mack here on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, John.
Hey, thank you, guys.
He's brought to you by
Good
Gino,
stuff,
the
John.
winemaker's choice for 50 years. Visit Gino Pinto on the White Horse Pike in Hamilton, online at GinoPinto.com. Gino's, the winemaker's choice for 50 years.